so much for all your time, not just today at Amplify, but over the last few months. Definitely couldn't have done this without you. To kick us off, starting with you, Nick, could you give us a very brief overview of your current role, your background, and your team right now?
Sure. So I'm a development leader in IBM Cloud, working on user experience and analytics.
You want to go next, Madhu?
Sure. My name is Madhu Prabaker, Director of Product at HotelTonight. If you haven't used HotelTonight, it's the best way to find amazing deals at top hotels.
I'm sold.
And I manage a team of 5 PMs.
And I'm David Marble. I work at Walmart now as a Director of Growth Infrastructure, kind of marketing technology, advertising technology. Worked very recently, as in a week ago, at Intuit for about 5 years. So I may lapse between pronouns and verb tenses for we and stuff like that as we go along.
We'll forgive you.
Thank you.
So starting with you, Nick, I've been reading about how the cloud business is the fastest growing team within IBM, just such a long transformation journey for the whole company. Could you share a little bit with our audience of what were some of those critical bets that your team made, and what were some of those early elements you had to put in to achieve this really tremendous achievement?
Sure. Obviously, there's a ton of effort and a ton of people involved in different aspects. But certainly from my team and my organization, we've had a lot of initial focus on building a growth engine, enabling and connecting a lot of data from different sources across the company. That's very fundamental to the next sort of big area of investment for us, which is really around empowerment. So for us, empowerment of the growth engine means putting it in the hands of everybody across the organization. So we have thousands of people that get access to our tools, and we've tried to build what we consider a bit of a data democracy, and I know Laura spoke about that yesterday. The data democracy is key in my mind because we basically break out the decision-making process and we push it right out to the leaf nodes of our organization, meaning we can have the end products ultimately making their business decisions and then ultimately reporting back results to our executive communities rather than asking for questions or asking for permission. And then finally, the most exciting part from my perspective of what we do is we invest in what ultimately results in emergence. So you can't invest and buy emergence, but when you have all the right tools, when everybody has access to those tools, and you invest in exploration and review of the data, you find yourself being very surprised by some of the results, and that's what we've found. We've had organizations and teams that have found click farms where we saved mass amounts of money for our marketing organization. They didn't go out seeking to try and find whether or not we had click farms that were sapping money. They found them because they were trying to understand their products, and as a result of trying to understand their products, they came across these things. So I think those are the 3 real areas that we've invested in.
Yeah, the idea of emergence is really fascinating, like this idea that you don't know you're looking for click farms, but you can still discover them without knowing what you're looking for. David, Intuit had a really well-known history for best-in-class qualitative research. Does what Nick say resonate at Intuit around this idea that you can discover what questions to ask using democratized data?
I don't know, Sandhya. Democracy, empowerment, curiosity.
Now you guys know why we have him.
Data's powerful. I don't know. Can we trust people with this?
I don't know. It's too much power, I think.
It's a lot of power. Maybe there should be a license to data that people have to get eventually. Over my time at Intuit, we are very well known for excellent customer research. Recently, it's been making the rounds of training that we call Say Plus Do, where we discuss, well, customers have a lot to say, and you should listen if you're willing to put in the effort. But does what they do match with what they say? And furthermore, is there something in what they're doing that is information you could not have gleaned by asking them questions? And that manifests itself in 2 ways. Even within the qualitative research, there's a data element to it we're very famous for one particular user research method we call the follow me home, where you'll spend time directly with one of your customers. And how we name that, the follow me home, sometimes it turns into, well, you're just sitting and asking questions. How special is that? But in its ideal form, it's following the customer and watching. And then occasionally as they act, asking a question. Wait, why did you do that? The same thing exists online, though a little bit less ability to say, hey, why did you do that? But there's a treasure trove of that behavioral data that if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and make available to people within your company, you can pair that with voice of the customer feedback of various kinds. I'd say one of the most impressive retention analyses I saw at Intuit was actually done by a marketer, and this partly due to products like Amplitude. He took a mixture of some Amplitude charts, some Tableau custom dashboards. We're always going to have a need for data experts, but I feel like data's become everybody's job description now. He took a mixture of these various tools, some of the self-discovery, some of the custom stuff we'd put together, and laid out excellent hypotheses. I'd say one of the most important outcomes of building up a data-backed culture is that you eliminate one of the worst time wasters, which is uninformed hypotheses, product and marketing. You can start further ahead, you do less dart throwing. So measure your say and do, better hypotheses, profit. Yeah.
Awesome. I've really loved how well Intuit has been able to modernize, but still keep its founding principles. Yeah. Something that, we are a very small company, but as we grow, really thinking hard about that. Yeah. Now, Madhu, Justin and James were just up here raving about HotelTonight, how you guys do impact analyses when you release products, confirm hypotheses. What's the backstory there? Could you share a little bit about the process you guys follow?
Yeah, and I'll share maybe there's three aspects of a really impactful feature for us. One is that it's addressing a really well-defined customer need. The second thing is that we have the ability to change the behavior for that set of customers. And the third thing is that we're able to scale it. So just to unpack that a little bit, at the highest level, at the need level, when you look across all your customers, they all look homogeneous. Anybody that's booking a hotel is going to care about availability, price, and location. But then when we start really digging in and looking at individual cohorts, business users versus leisure travelers, planners versus procrastinators, then you start seeing all these interesting differences. So we try to start our product effort and our features at that level. Once we're able to get there, we have a very particular cohort that we're looking for. We have a really well-defined need, and all we're trying to do is change the behavior for that cohort. And if you're able to do that, then you get into the fun part, which is just scaling. And that means for us being able to attract as many customers within that cohort, drive awareness and adoption, but then also look to adjacent cohorts of customers that have similar needs and see if we can kind of grow in that way.
And how do you manage for who's accountable for the success of an experiment or just the scaling, given that you guys have really nice cross-functional teams?
Yeah, so we're a startup, and how we've thought about this is that there's understanding user needs, there's being able to create a behavior change, and there's scaling. So in other companies, that might be 3 different teams: user research, product, and growth. At HotelTonight, all of that responsibility and accountability is really in kind of the core team, the product manager, the designer, and the engineering lead. So we really have to kind of have some dexterity in how we think about projects. We need to be able to employ the right methodologies and tactics depending on which stage. So very much, like Nick said, it's really around creating kind of a growth mindset and providing that throughout the organization.
Got it. Well, Nick, your team is probably an order of magnitude bigger than all of HotelTonight. So how do you guys think about cross-functional development? That must be a pretty new concept to try to implement across IBM.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we strive actually to be more like HotelTonight. So we actually work very hard to not have a single growth organization or a single growth team, but instead to take that mindset that essentially to lay out a growth fabric across our entire organization and to fundamentally have everybody in the organization, regardless of what specific product role or skill set they bring, to approach what they do with the growth mentality, the growth mindset, and to take that approach across our products. Got it.
And David, what about cross-functional teams set into it? I remember you had shared stories in the past around, you have analytics that's not embedded, maybe embedded? How does everyone collaborate towards this common goal?
I think every big company reached this state where you can't understand everything that's going on in the company.
Right.
It's just kind of a given. We had central analytics org, central data science org, some analysts directly on a specific product with lots of product lines going on. And some of those teams worked really well together, partnership between product and analytics. Some of them worked a little less well in terms of, well, everybody's reliant on an analyst to give you every answer if it has anything to do with data. I think one of the most important learnings we got over time is just how much overhead there is if you let that data, the data overhead creep. And at some point, it just gets to a breaking point where I think of it like a continuum with medical expertise. You've got the WebMD basic questions on one hand, you've got the integrative medicine and surgical experts on the other, and it's super problematic if you're spending a ton of your experts' time answering super basic WebMD kind of questions.
Right.
We found, after rolling out products like an Amplitude with good instrumentation, a very important, very important caveat, that up to about half of our analyst expert time they got back to put back into decision support, the kinds of things you've hired them to do,
right,
rather than answering basic reporting questions. So that say-do presentation I mentioned, or training, was actually run by a design group. Had come up with that originally. Again, data becoming everybody's job title. So I don't think about it just as analysts versus product teams. I think of it as data professionals who've spent a lot of their lives thinking about statistics and training their mind, and everyone else. And everyone else, this needs to become an internal product. You need to think about it just like you do personas for your external product. What are all of my internal personas for the use of data and data itself? How am I going to treat that as a product in its own right?
Right, citizen data scientists. So before we close this panel out, I wanted to check in with you, Madhu, on this idea of experimentation versus vision, which is something that I've heard you guys talk about very eloquently. How do you guys balance that, kind of having this experiment approach, being metrics-driven, but not losing sight of your vision in a fairly crowded market?
Yeah, and I think, because of the industry that HotelTonight's in, we have this interesting property. A really active person on our platform maybe books 2 or 3 times a year. This is just how much people travel. So for every experiment we run, we have this interesting problem where we have really, really great data on our kind of leading indicators, front of funnel conversion metric, and we can get this within a handful of days. And then we have a long lag before we're able to get data on our lagging indicator, our long-term retention metric. And I would argue that that's actually the most important one. But that might take months or a year for us to be able to get this. So a recent test that we ran was around resort fees. These are fees that are imposed by the hotel. And if you've ever booked a hotel with resort fees, generally customers dislike these. So we felt the right thing to do was to be able to inform our customers that when these fees existed. So we ran a number of tests. We tested a variety of different designs. Every single one of these tests showed that it was conversion negative. So we got this immediate kind of negative signal initially, and we have this unknown in terms of long-term retention. So what do we do in this case? And we're still a startup, so we want to be able to move quickly. And I think this is where having kind of a strong sense of what your company vision is, what is the core value prop your product's defining, and then also, what's the right thing to do for the customer is super helpful. So in cases like this, we can reflect on that and say, obviously, I think we want to have our customers be informed and help them make the right decision. So that was the right path moving forward. So in cases like this, we're able to fall back to that when we do have incomplete data, make the decision, and we rolled out the test. We're still going to look at long-term retention. When we get that data, that'll feed back into our model, but we're not kind of hampered by that. So I think that, another thing that we've learned over time is that, when we bias towards doing what was right for the customer, it ended up being right for the business in the long view. So that's kind of the way that we use both of those.
Well, you make it sound easy, but what was it like when the trade-off was actually getting made in the room? Did you have people on both sides of the debate saying, no, we can't do this because there's a short-term negative impact? no, we need to do, like,
Yeah.
what was that like?
Absolutely, it's extremely painful, right? We're trying to build sustainable growth in our company. Obviously, when we look at kind of that short-term negative impact, we try to minimize that as much as possible. But we recognize a lot of things that we do that are actually right things for the customer may introduce a little bit of friction, or may actually sway them away from making a purchase decision. But ultimately, that's going to help them become a loyal, trusted customer, and that'll pay off in the long term.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Have they earned a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen?